Zoro versus Big Mom. I understand what you're thinking. No way this is a close fight. No way this is even a real fight that's being talked about. Trust me, just hear me out, listen to the video, alright? I talked about this on my live streams on TikTok where I go over my top 20, my scaling list, and I understand that people think that it's crazy to believe that Zoro could potentially beat Big Mom. I first want to ask you, are you just wrapped up in the thought of Big Mom's name, her being a Yonko? What do you think the next power progression for Zoro would be after fighting King, right? I don't even think that there's necessarily a commander tier of power because there's such vast levels of strength between the commanders. But the next progression would be the weakest of the next echelon, the weakest of the Yonko tier, so to speak, if you want to call it that, and that is Big Mom. Now, that has nothing to do with the scaling, but I'm just saying you guys got to start understanding that we're reaching the end game of the series here. This shit starts to happen. Characters start to get cliffed and passed. With Big Mom, her scaling is pretty straightforward. She scales to base Kaido. For all intents and purposes, that's her best scaling. She fought Kaido for an unspecified period of time that could be 3 days. It also could be a day, 12 hours, something of that sort. We have an unspecified period of time. We just know that the fight started 8 days before the raid. We got an update 12 hours later, or half a day later through the night. And then that was the last update we got. And then the next time we see them, there's 5 days till the raid. And they're already well done fighting, feasting, and all this other shit. So it could have been 3 days, could have been 12 hours. I'll leave that up to you. It doesn't really matter. From what we saw when the fight started and in the update, Kaido was in base form. They split the sky when Kaido was in base form. That's indicative of relativity in that form. You have to be relative to somebody to split the sky with them. This is a common theme. That's why Yamato could never split the sky with Kaido. Despite being able to keep up with him, she was never relative to that level of Haki. That's why when Luffy comes up, he can split the sky with Kaido, etc, etc. And people got to understand that base Kaido scales vastly below hybrid Kaido and even arguably dragon, but really just hybrid. That's really all we talk about. And hybrid in and of itself has layers upon layers of its strength as Kaido nerfs himself down for the majority of the time we see him and only truly reaches his maximum capacity in the fight against Gear 5 Luffy. And there's some people that take the interpretation that regardless of the form Kaido's in, his Haki is going to be the same level essentially. So when they split the sky, just because he's in base, his Conquerors Haki is never going to change whether it's in hybrid or base, which doesn't make any sense to me because the whole premise of going into a higher form is that it gives him better stats stated. So him having better stats would make him faster, make him stronger, which would amplify the force of the attack. So his Haki is just going to be used in conjunction with the force that he is amplifying from his speed and power, etc, etc. So that doesn't work. Also, Luffy literally states when Kaido goes into the drunken forms, his Haki starts getting stronger. Everything we've seen up to that point was just basically cliffed by Kaido himself, showing that he was holding back the entire time and that he is now like actually taking the fight serious. That's why he says to Luffy, this is the first time in how long somebody could truly go toe to toe with me, which also adds credence to the fact that Big Mom was never truly relative to Kaido, as he did not view that as her really truly going toe to toe, probably because he stayed in base, understanding that he wasn't truly letting loose the way that he knows he could. So she scales to base Kaido, and people will say, well, it's also base Big Mom, quote unquote, because she didn't use her soul amps in bigger mom form, which is true, but that form is unquantifiably stronger. We don't really have a point of reference to go on. She literally fights the same opponents in Law and Kid and doesn't do anything more impressive. We don't even know what it specifically does to make her stronger besides making her bigger. Does her durability increase? We have no point of reference on this, as Law's abilities simply just bypass durability anyway, and Kid able to still inflict damage on Big Mom. So it's kind of a featless form in terms of like differentiating between regular Big Mom and bigger mom. All we know is that Kid and Law still have success against the form. They're able to take attacks from it. They're able to inflict damage on it. That's all we have. Now, the problem for Big Mom is that Law and Kid don't have any feats on hybrid Kaido. The only attack that you see that lands from either of them on hybrid Kaido is the injection shot from Law, which Law should be able to damage anybody anyway. That's just the baseline and the gimmick of his ability, where he did damage Kaido, sure, but he essentially just got slammed down. And some people try to argue he reacted to Kaido here. The whole thing here, which is why it isn't a feat for Law, is that Kaido was going after Zoro And it wasn't like a Bagua or anything anyway. It was just like a baseline Kanabo swing. And Law trades places with Zoro, catching Kaido by surprise as he was going for Zoro. And then Law surprises him and hits him with the injection shot. Kaido then takes the damage. And then like while he's processing getting stabbed in the throat, Law puts up curtain because he knows he's going to get rocked. And then Kaido just slams Law into the ground. We also just see after this, Law get blatantly blitzed badly by Bagua when he was trying to save Zoro from being helpless on the ground and taking the Bagua from Kaido. Before he could teleport over, before he could get to Zoro, he's immediately blitzed, and this is an attack that hit Zoro first, so he wasn't even the primary target. It still isn't the greatest point of reference. In my opinion, I still think Big Mom hasn't even proven to be on this level, but you know, Law can at least damage this form, and you know, Big Mom had also put Law down even while he was using Awakening. So at best, the greatest highball you're gonna have is getting Big Mom to this level of Kaido, this baseline nerf version of hybrid, the first hybrid that we see. That's it. In fairness, without having Zeus, we see that she combines Prometheus or Zeus or Hera with Napoleon to like kind of amplify her AP on her sword. We don't see that in the clash with Kaido. She doesn't have Zeus at that time, obviously. She has Prometheus, at least we have no reason to believe she doesn't, but we don't see it being used here, so who knows if it was used in the fight or not. Either way, it doesn't change anything from what I've said. At best, like I said, the highball for her is going to be getting her to that original nerfed hybrid Kaido. And yes, when Big Mom does lose to Kid and Law, it is very situational. They get help from Yamato unleashing the firebomb monster that ends up exploding on her as she falls down into the volcano. She's also unable to use her homies as Law used, you know, his soundproof button, and it's more so of a ring out. That doesn't really make any difference here, as I don't view Law and Kid that high in comparison to Zoro, that is. So that point's gonna really be irrelevant. Now, as far as their one-to-one comparisons go, I like to start off with just showing that yes, Zoro was able to react to Big Mom on multiple occasions on the roof. You see him react to when she was going to punch Luffy with Prometheus. She was using her fist, coating with Prometheus, and he cuts through the flame. You also see that she comes down with a sword attack to cut through Luffy, and Zoro's able to run back, pick up Luffy, and still dodge the slash. So nice little moments. You also see that Big Mom acknowledges that Zoro has the AP to damage her and Kaido even before Advanced Conk, even before really anything. He's just using Enma one sword style as she implores and screams out for Kaido to dodge. Then after the attack cuts through the Onigashima horn, she says we've underestimated them, doubles down on it again, and then gives praise again to Zoro and is dumbfounded at the fact that holy shit, he actually just cut through Kaido's scales and damaged him with the Dragon Twister. All this is well before Ashura or Advanced Conk. So we understand that even at that point, Zoro could do damage to her. So then we move on to Ashura. You know, while Zoro's bones were all broken from the double Yonko attack, mind you, that he reacted before Law could even teleport the guys out of there. Everybody involved, a lot of people like to downplay this feat for some crazy reason, just because it's just like a lot of Zoro hate. Everybody on the panel is hyping up this feat, and then you got people still downplaying because they want to talk about the time period or whatever happened, and doubles down on Killer's statement that like, how are they going to avoid it? Nobody was prepared to avoid it. Nobody did avoid it until Zoro reacted. He literally allowed everybody to avoid the attack by blocking it. He's the one that did it. Law couldn't believe it. Law couldn't even believe he was still breathing after taking the attack. Luffy called it a huge attack. Kaido and Big Mom thought that that was potentially enough to wipe them all out and kill them. That's what the intent behind that attack was. Then you have Law, who still can't even believe Zoro can continue on fighting, as he's shown to be time and time again completely impressed with Zoro on multiple occasions, which we'll get into again with the Ashura moment. With the Ashura moment, Zoro's the one that steps up to protect Luffy, as he should. It's his captain, and he uses Ashura, and this is not an off guard. Kaido sees it coming. Kaido gets prepared, and there's actually clash marks on the panel indicating that they had two small clashes before the final attack. Now, I don't use the animated scale. I don't consider the anime as canon, but the anime does show these two clashes. And in this case, when you do see that there is the sound effect for the clank marks, you understand that this did happen. He cuts through then the tempo of the fight as you see Kaido loading up his attack to block the next volley or potentially throw a counterattack at Zoro. He gets blitzed in the tempo of this fight. It's not necessarily like I think he's blitzing a full power Kaido or Kaido's going all out. Nobody's making that claim, but in the tempo of this fight, he scaled to this version of Kaido speed, able to bypass the durability and leave a lasting scar on him that Kaido himself says it was a legitimate attack. Zoro downplaying himself by saying, I wish I could have brought him to his knees, is one of the most overblown things the One Piece community rides on. They like to compare it to everybody and their mom about him not being able to bring Kaido down to his knees. You guys got to understand that in the context of this, it's because Zoro has such high pride for himself. He's hoping that Kaido, after taking the pain and enduring it, as you see, Kaido internally takes damage from this. It wasn't just the surface wound of the scar. He spits up blood from the attack, would fall forward to his knees, right? It's not a situation where you just push somebody down or he trips up, something like that. Now, I do think that the Luffy comparison where Luffy gets up and uses advanced conk is something that's supposed to be compared to this, where Luffy immediately gets up and then puts Kaido down. But don't forget, it's a volley of about 3 attacks that land there. It's not just one attack. He does crunch Kaido up with the initial body shot and then punches him down to the ground. Sure, 100%, but this would not apply to everybody else that's ever knocked Kaido down at any point. Even with this one directly, which is I think the most funny, is the Scabbards. They knocked him down and they're talking about severing Kaido's windpipe and he looks to be in terrible shape. It's comical. And the funny thing is that this attack that landed on Kaido is like directly compared to Zoro's attack later with Ashura, where it's like their attack, the combined force of 4 of the Scabbards, is too shallow to even reopen the scar. And then obviously Zoro surpasses the AP of all 4 of them and fucking reopens the scar, creates his own new wound and internally damages Kaido at that, and Kaido doesn't go to the ground. So we understand that the AP of this attack was well beyond the AP of that attack where Kaido was on the ground. So it's just a different scenario. For one, Kaido in the dragon form is more clunky and he kind of falls all the time. So I wouldn't even really count anytime it's the dragon form that got knocked down regardless, but I hear people doing it. Then you have like somebody like Yamato who is getting just like overwhelmed the entire time she's fighting Kaido. Kaido either just reacts to her attack, matches the output, or fucking just blatantly overpowers her attack right after whatever she does. And then she's clearly like only there to hold out. She knows she can't do anything. She resorts to a trick where she throws the Kanaba, where you see Kaido isn't impressed with what's coming, and then she uses her claws on top of the Kanaba throw. She just like uses momentum to push him down. Doesn't do any damage to him, but pushes him down. This is not what Zoro's referencing, just being able to trip him down. By this logic, are we saying that he knocked Big Mom down when he cut Prometheus and she fell down? Or all the other examples I've already presented, the only scenario which I personally think can even be compared is the Luffy one, given that it happens right after the dialogue takes place and Luffy comes up and Luffy's supposed to, of course, cliff the feats that Zoro had, as he's the captain, he's the main guy, he's the main character, he's supposed to be the spotlight guy. But even then, like I said, it's not the same thing where it's like Zoro used one attack and then Luffy comes up with power that Kaido wasn't expecting, as he wasn't expecting him to have advanced conk. He just learned how to use it. Boom, drills him gut shot, hits him with an uppercut, and then puts him on the ground. It's like it was a combo. I think it's different, but you get what I'm saying. With that said, even when you're looking at the context of Zoro's attacks, it's like he's blitzing past somebody when he does this. He slices you and he ends up behind you. It's like what he always does. He even did it to Lucci in the recent shit, and Lucci didn't go down either. It's just the way that it goes. It's like, it's not necessarily like a momentum push attack. It's like he slices the shit out of you, cuts through you, and then like he's by you. That's how a slice works. So it's completely different than like a force where you punch someone. When you punch somebody, you can punch them and they can like fly back or whatever. Like you're pushing with a punch. With the sword, it's more just like finesse. Boom, you cut up, you cut through, you cut there, and then he ends up behind him. That's just kind of the aesthetics. It's always kind of been Zoro's aesthetics. Obviously, I'm sure that there are times where like a push effect happens, but in this case, that's not what was supposed to happen. It's supposed to be an effect where he slices, boom, he's behind Kaido. And Kaido just endured the pain, endured the damage, and stayed up. And Kaido himself makes sure to hype up the feat as being something that was worthy, and also say like, at that point, the generation is proven to be an annoyance, where Big Mom and Kaido both have those statements where we've underestimated them, it's proven to be an annoyance, always in reference to Zoro. They prioritize Zoro on the roof besides Luffy, and I think that's very apparent. With that said, we have a situation where this was also not an advanced Conquerors attack with Ashura. People think it was. If you think this was an advanced Conquerors attack, for one, you'd essentially be thinking that every time Zoro's ever used Ashura in the series, even pre-time skip, was advanced Conquerors, because he's doing the exact same thing he did then with no knowledge of how to use advanced Conquerors. Now, that's not enough evidence, obviously, but the evidence is very clear that it looks completely different than advanced Conquerors looks. There's a clear distinction when he uses Ashura to when he uses advanced Conquerors with King, purposefully unloads all his haki into his swords, something that he previously thought to be impossible. And that is essentially the frame shift that allowed him to imbue Conqueror's haki into his swords. Even when using Ashura, he never intended to kill him. That's what he deems to be the highest potency attack he can get off at that point. But that's not the same kind of mentality he has of just, I'm gonna do something I never thought possible, which is just truly allowing the swords to take everything from me and put it into the blade. That is the true imbuement of Conquerors. That is his true Conquerors coding, and that's when he starts knocking people out. That's when it's right there. People like to say it's advanced Conquerors because Kaido mentions Conquerors. You can acknowledge Conquerors and sends Conquerors haki without it being imbued into the swords, without being advanced. We saw this with Treble and Doflamingo on the top of Dressrosa. When Luffy blocks his kick and they have the Conqueror's haki clash, Treble notices that Conqueror's haki is being used and exuded all over the place. Even when John Chinjiao and Luffy fight, when they punch each other's fist, the crowd is recognizing that it was Conqueror's haki. It wasn't advanced Conquerors, obviously. It wasn't imbued into their fist. Sometimes when your will is just shown to be this strong, you can exude Conqueror's haki without actually imbuing it. That's all that's happening here. That's why there's a clear distinction in the power levels, and that's why Zoro gets massively stronger later, which is easy to prove. So as well as we see the fact that with this instance, you have Kaido, whose durability is either less than or equal to King's in his Dura form. The Seraphims on Egghead are compared by Luffy to Kaido's durability. King himself seems to think that his durability exceeds Kaido's. Also, obviously, the fact that Zoro was already able to cut through Kaido's dragon scales before King. That's not even including the Ashura time. Just with the Dragon Twister, he cut through his scales and he's landed direct hits on King in his Dura form. Even if you want to talk about the wings, which are a part of King's body, which is mentioned here, you've seen the Lion Song, you've seen all these other attacks where he's tried cutting through him and he hasn't made him bleed once. So we understand that King's durability in that form is at a higher level, which is just consistent. And then you have a situation where Zoro, when he unlocks advanced Conqueror's haki, and then when King realizes that Zoro's AP has drastically improved, he starts desperately blocking the attacks. He starts blocking and getting pushed back onto his back foot, where he's literally blocking everything in his Dura form, highlighted specifically, giving us the clear implication that even though we didn't see it happen because no attack ends up landing, Zoro can bypass Lunarian Dura form durability. Therefore, all his attacks seemingly just caught up to the Ashura that was on the roof, that was able to truly bypass Kaido's durability, his scales, to a point where he can do like an actual amount of damage, not just surface wounds. And that's the standing of his AP with his named attacks using Conqueror's haki. Then you would stack Ashura back on top, and the rest is history. So we essentially have, he's already able to damage Big Mom with one sword, Enma. 3 swords is going to be a small little boost. Then Ashura. Then you would go to the advanced Conquerors rung, which is going to be similar with that Ashura tier. Then you would stack Ashura with advanced Conquerors, which we've yet to see. That is the power that he is at currently. So him being able to damage Big Mom, not in question. Him being able to react to Big Mom and keep up in speed with her, not in question. We've already seen this. His battle IQ being better than hers really speaks for itself. So then we move to another point of reference where we just go straight up from Kaido's own mouth. He believes that Oden is still above Big Mom by his pretty much own admission when he talks about how high will Luffy's ceiling go, right? He just fought with Big Mom and he's comparing Luffy still being weaker than all the 5 people behind him, obviously with Oden being the weakest of those guys, as these are the people that he has fought, only referencing people he's fought, so it really only matters for Big Mom. These are the people that he deems as like the most impressive. Big Mom is not there. This is essentially just him putting Oden over Big Mom 1-to-1. I don't really know how else to say it. Then it gets reinforced by the fact that when he fights with Luffy, he literally says, "How long has it been since I fought somebody that could truly go toe-to-toe with me?" Telling us even further, if you don't want to agree with that first point, that Big Mom was not on his level. She could not truly go toe-to-toe with Kaido, despite them fighting. And it further adds credence to the point that I mentioned earlier about it simply just was Kaido in base. That's why he knows he's so far superior to her. Because if they're just having a little match in base, and of course he likes the thrill of the fight, so he stayed in it. He's seen her power level and he called her pathetic multiple times. Him understanding and fully showing us what he's truly capable of against Luffy, and understanding, yes, this is finally somebody who can go toe-to-toe with me, reinforces the fact that she was never relative to him in the first place, and there's no scalable feats that get her to that point. And for anybody confused about Oden and Zoro's comparability, check out my Oden and Kaido video for more clearance on that. Oden was like relative in speed to a base Kaido. Like, we saw this. And then he took 5 years to not train, not do anything better. They fought. He fought him in dragon form. He landed 1 attack on the dragon form, which was the big thing. But Zoro replicates this feat on a faster version of Kaido with the same, if not greater durability based on the interpretation you take from the statement about the stats being all amplified, whether that just applies to base or dragon, but regardless has better feats and better speed feats for sure, because this version of Dragon Kaido, we have no confirmation whether or not he even had future sight at this time, without his main power-up of Advanced Conquerors before that power-up. So I view Oden and Ashura Zoro on the roof as very close in power. Maybe I'll make a video specifically on that, but I mean, he literally has a better feat. And then essentially when he finally unlocks Advanced Conquerors, all his baseline attacks, named attacks, get to that level. And then Ashura just kind of takes him over the threshold again. So that's kind of where we are. And anybody wants to bring up stamina, as far as Zoro's stamina with, using the swords, Egghead, he's already shown much more mastery over this, as he can temper and tempo how much output he's putting out, as he has more flame control. And then you see that didn't even mention any problems with stamina throughout the entirety of the arc when he was fighting with Lucci, and he paced himself perfectly to never overexert. I don't even think you can assert that there's still an issue after he understands how to use it anyway, because once he kind of had that light bulb moment, there's no real problems that happen anymore. So we essentially have a situation where Big Mom, who also fought Kaido with a sword, and it doesn't matter whether you think she's a swordsman or not, even if you say she's not, she fights with other abilities or homies or whatever the case, she fought with a sword against Kaido. Predominantly Napoleon is one of her 3 major homies, and it was clearly able to clash with the Bagua, right? So it has AP that was similar to even base Kaido, and base Kaido has lesser durability than Dragon or Hybrid. She was never able to land a blow that was similar to Zoro or Oden, was never able to reopen the scar, was never able to do anything like this to land anything of significance on Kaido. Now, she didn't have Zeus in that fight, as well as like the bigger mom form that I got into. You can come up with yourself how valuable Zeus is when, characters like Killer and Kid are tanking full Goras from Hera, who's above Zeus anyway. Point blank, Killer took attacks from Zeus before that regardless. So I don't really view it as that significant. Then her opponents with Law and Kid, it's not overly impressive. People want to say she didn't use Advanced Conquerors. May or may not be true. Whatever Oda decided, for whatever reason, plot, if she just simply doesn't know how to control it consciously, whatever explanation you want to give, it's stated that she gave Law and Kid everything she had, right? And that she was fighting for her life, and there's really no other reason for her to be doing this. Obviously, she just used it on page 1, or she deemed the power she was using to be more valuable. Maybe Oda just wanted us to assume she was using it. Regardless, it is what it is. Also, just because I know somebody will mention it, Zoro talking about being impressed with Oden wielding Enma literally means nothing in terms of them scaling for each other. For one, it's literally mentioned that Enma pulls the user's Haki out, so it scales to the user's amount of Haki. So whatever amount of Haki it drains from you is simply going to be a ton for you to deal with based on the levels that you have. So when Oden has had the sword since he was a kid and can get used to it scaling up with him every year, every time he gets stronger, it's going to be much easier for him to wield that than it is for Zoro to wield it after getting a week to fucking train with it, and being at such a high level right now that mastering it is going to be insanely difficult, because he has such a big amount of power that it takes a lot more. So that argument would never work. We get a point where Law stabs through Big Mom and she just unloads punches with Haki on her fist, and Law just endures. You see Kid able to endure multiple attacks from Big Mom when he didn't even have his arm, when it was lost to Hawkins and she couldn't take him out. Obviously, I think Big Mom was still stronger than the two of them. They're irrelevant to it, but I'm just saying that these characters that have lesser feats than Zoro, especially from a point where we already just went into that double Yonko attack thing, which all the parties involved here glazed that attack, glazed the feat from Zoro, and his baseline stats are showing better than theirs on the roof. It really starts to make you pose the question and wonder. I see this as an extreme div fight for Zoro that I see him pulling out. By no means do I think it's easy, of course, but with all the information we have, it's the conclusion I think makes the most sense, but I'm sure a lot will disagree. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. To all my supporters, I really appreciate it. Please drop a like on the video, send it out. Hella time was involved, so send the video out. Let's get people on the train. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.